YouTube, Lizzie B here. Today I wanted to make a video because, as I mentioned in my tooth video, I'm heading out of town. I'm going to Utah to the Sundance Film Festival, and I'm excited. It's my first time going, but you know, I feel like I've been neglecting my page, and I just wanted to throw something up here that I've been thinking about quite a bit, and you know, I'm still kind of working it out in my mind, so please forgive me if I ramble a bit in this video. I'm really just personally trying to put the pieces together for myself. A lot of times with these videos, they're very therapeutic for me in a sense, especially when they're about Jehovah's Witness stuff. So let me jump right into it. With this video, I want to talk to you guys about why it took me so long to wake up. I am in my mid-30s, and it took me up until, I want to say 2 years ago, like maybe a year and a half ago, when I first started making these videos, that is when I woke up. It was very, very recent. It was kind of like as soon as I woke up, I was like, oh my God, you know, let me start making these videos. And that's what I've been doing. But you know, I had a long time to find out a lot of information, and there was a long hiatus for me away from the organization that I could have woken up in that time, and I did not. And I had so many people that really tried to talk to me, and people that made so much sense, but it still never quite clicked. And I think, considering that I wasn't going to the Kingdom Hall, like I was kind of like on a very long hiatus, nobody really felt the need to convince me of anything, because I'm sure people assumed that, being that I wasn't an active Jehovah's Witness, I wasn't a baptized Jehovah's Witness, that I was no longer indoctrinated, but I was. And that, you know, kind of reared its ugly head when I went and got baptized as an adult. So I want to talk a little bit about that. First, I will give you some background about me. I grew up in the organization. My mom got baptized when, you know, I was like in preschool, and you know, as long as I remember, we like did, you know, we went to the Kingdom Hall. And so I think it was like, my mom started studying when I was like 2 years old. I think that was around the time, like, we have one set of pictures, family pictures of us opening presents on Christmas Day. And I think we were like 2, something like that. I know we were like a bunch of naked kids opening up presents, like half dressed and whatever, just, you know, sleepy eyed, had, you know, a ball, open up presents, big Christmas tree in the background. It was glorious. But that was the last Christmas that we celebrated as a family, and I barely even remember it. And from that point on, it was all, you know, Jehovah's Witness, Kingdom Hall, we don't celebrate anything, you know, all of that stuff. And so I know there's a lot of people that are like, I was born in the truth, you know, like that's kind of a hierarchy when it comes to being in an organization, whether you were born into it. Now, I didn't know that there was a generational thing. Oh, I'm 3 generations in. I never knew that was a big thing. So when people ask, I'm like, no, I wasn't born into it, but I might as well have been, because I don't remember anything before it. So, you know, I talked a little bit in my other video about how, you know, as kids and preteens, my mom, you know, when I was a preteen, I think I was a preteen, or I was just a teenager, whatever the case was, my mom had got disfellowshipped. And from that point on, the congregation really kind of turned on us as kids, in addition to my mother, of course. And you know, we were a tight family, and my mom was very specific about, you know, making sure that nobody was able to groom us. You know, you know, if you know anything about child molestation or anything like that, a lot of it starts with grown-ups being able to form relationships with kids, and in so doing, they manipulate them into kind of, you know, just inappropriate relationships. And so my mom was very careful to not allow that, but she still, you know, would make sure that we spoke and you know, were socialized in a sense with the Jehovah's Witnesses. So when she got disfellowship, that stopped. Nobody reached out to us as kids, or, you know, it was kind of like they treated us like we were also disfellowshipped, and that it was just inappropriate. Like, it's kind of like if we were to say hi, they wouldn't speak back to us. It was just very, very, very much we were being treated like we were disfellowshipped. And in a big sense that kind of rocked our foundation as a family within the organization. But it did not stop us from believing that the organization was true. I kind of stuck with certain things in my mind because I felt like our congregation was the extreme when it comes to being a bad congregation. And it was a very corrupt congregation. There was a lot of, gossip and just terrible attitudes. People were, it was always something going on at our Kingdom Hall, to the point where we always had a circuit overseer coming through, or somebody. There was always someone being sent from Bethel to talk to our congregation and to try and get, a sense of what was going on. There was always something going on because our congregation was known for being corrupt. And so because of that, I kind of always assumed that what the bad things that I saw within the Jehovah's Witness religion was just specifically our congregation. I assumed that's why we saw so much, like as kids, they weren't speaking to us and they were doing things the wrong way. I knew even as a kid that we had a very corrupt congregation. And so I kind of carried that with me, thinking, oh, it's just specific to ours. Now, don't get me wrong, being that we went to such a kind of terrible congregation, it did make me feel like maybe this isn't the truth. I kind of question things, but at the end of the day, it's like when you don't have anything else to compare it to, you don't know. So I got older. I didn't really go to the Kingdom Hall anymore. I think my mom started going back when we were teens, and I would go a little bit with her to kind of support her and that kind of thing. But by that point, I was just focusing more on getting into college, because I was like, no matter what, no matter what the consequences are, I need to be able to support myself. There's no way in the world. I knew what a minimum wage salary was, and I was like, I'm not doing it. I refuse. And I come from a very, very small town, and there was like a corner store and a dollar store, and those are your job options. I'm getting out of this town. I don't care what it takes. I'll get out. I'll graduate from college, and then you can lecture me about not going to college. And that's what I did. So I went to college, and I lived my life. I did my own thing, and this was the time where I really, really could have learned about different things. I guess I could have really, really kind of delved into the origins of Jehovah's Witnesses, all of that. But mind you, and I hate to, I've already told y'all how old I am pretty much, but I will say that the internet wasn't really like popping like it is now. Like, there was no Google when I was going to college. So what little I did hear about, I didn't really take seriously, because a lot of it was through word of mouth. One thing that I also didn't really take too much advantage of is my mom's library. She had a huge library. I mean, I'm talking about bound volumes that went back, I think, to the 40s. I gotta ask her about it. But one thing that I've learned now in hindsight is that a lot of those old bound volumes of Watchtower and Awakes are very useful in waking up, because the information has changed so much. And but then again, I mean, I was indoctrinated, so I probably would have believed the whole new light spiel. But either way, there was a lot that I took for granted. I'll put it like that. And so I took the organization as being the truth. I took that for granted. Oh, I was born and raised in this. This is all I know. Therefore, this is the truth. And so I went to college, and I kind of carried that with me. I didn't really go to anybody's church when I was in college. I didn't go to the Kingdom Hall while I was in college. I, had fun with my friends. I went to parties. I did whatever I wanted to do. But in the back of my mind, I kept telling myself, I'm going to go back to the organization because I believed it to be the truth. And so once I graduated, it didn't take long. Like, I went to work immediately after. I started working in news, as I told you all. And I did that for a few years before I was like, okay, I'm going to, I think I worked in news for like 2 years before I said, okay, I'm going to start going back to the Kingdom Hall. And I started to study, And I found that there were so many things that I had to overlook. There was so much. And I don't remember as a child. Yeah, I mean, of course, as a child, you're not thinking too much. It's like somebody teaches you something and then you just, that's it. You know, you regurgitate it back and okay, that's fine. I've learned it. But as an adult, there were so many things that just struck me as odd and struck me as, well, you know, but there was that indoctrination from when I was growing up that kind of took over when it came to thinking for myself. So, you know, and also like you kind of make excuses, I think, to be able to deal with things. So somebody might say or do something that I didn't like, and I'm like, oh, that's just a personal thing. It's not, you know, that doesn't have anything to do with the organization. Or, you know, it's just, there was a lot of things, and I see a lot of people doing this in my comments too. Like if I say there's not really a lot of brotherly love, or, you know, and brotherly meaning encompassing all sexes, but, you know, within an organization, and Jehovah's Witnesses will come on to my page and they'll say something like, oh, well, that was just your congregation, or that's just your personal experience, or, you know, these are human traits. There's always going to be a person that does the wrong thing, blah, blah, blah. And so that's what I was doing. When I went back, I was like, okay, you know, I had all of these red flags. It felt like alarms were just constantly going off in my ear every time somebody would say or do something, but I always kind of brushed it off. And that kind of allowed me to stay indoctrinated by just not thinking, not really doing research, you know. They gave me a book, I read through the paragraph, and then I went to the bottom, I saw the answer, and being that and you know what, I'll put it like this, like, they make it so easy to not ask questions outside of the ones that they give you. They give you specific questions for a specific paragraph so that your mind is only within the confines of what they want you to think about, you know, or if you have to think about anything, you know what I mean? And in hindsight, when sometimes I'll look back at like the watchtowers, or I'll look at some of the books that I've kind of kept from when I was Jehovah's Witness, and the paragraph will be like, you know, Jesus loved all of us and he wants us to show that love to each other. And then the question is, who did Jesus love and why? And it's like, you know, there's nothing that allows you to question anything really. How do we know that Jesus exists? You know, like there's just a lot. So, you know, working within the confines of the religion, not questioning anything, and in a sense, it kind of, I think the organization kind of massages people's egos in that, you know, again, in hindsight, when I think about the meetings and people, it's like, okay, let me give you the example of the paragraph, the fake paragraph that I used just now. You go to a meeting and, you know, the conductor is saying, the study conductor is saying, okay, so who did Jesus love? One-handed. Jesus loved us. Jesus loved all of us, and that includes men and women. Jesus loved all of us, the children, the adults, and the elderly. That's correct. Oh, wow, very good answer. In harmony with that sister's comment, I would like to say that Jesus also loved animals, you know, that kind of thing. Watchtower study's a breeze. And like, it would get to the point where I would, if I had 10 minutes before the meeting, I'd just go through them. I wouldn't even have to read the entire paragraph to be able to prepare for the meeting, because it wasn't anything complicated about it at all. So you have a process, and you have a process that makes everybody feel very capable. You know, people are like, I know all about the Bible because I read it in the Watchtower. And, you know, number one, that doesn't make any sense. Why don't we just read the Bible? And number two, you know, the questions are already spelled out for you. So you can't ask the right questions because they're providing you the questions. You know, you're not going to say anything outside of what's in that Watchtower. So I feel like a lot of that kind of helped to keep me indoctrinated, because I didn't have time really to even think of other questions, and I didn't question it anyway, because that was what I was raised with, and I just assumed it to be the truth. So So yeah, so that was, you know, a few years in of me experiencing that. But some of the things that kind of could have woken me up, or like some of the things that happened to me throughout my experience within the organization, were, you know, I had people challenge my beliefs when I was out in field service. And so I remember there was this woman. I went out in field service with this sister, a pioneer sister, and she was very enthusiastic about it. I liked her a lot. She was a very friendly person. And that's another thing. When the Kingdom Hall that I grew up going to, the pioneers were like gangs. They were like the Bloods and the Crips. You know, either you was with this sister or that sister and her crew, and they were both, you know, like they had their territories. It was insane. Like it was just cutthroat to the point where they were physically fighting. Like people was, you know, really getting into it. And so this was the first time I experienced meeting pioneers that were not ready to, you know, snap your neck or anything. Like they were really nice women. And so I went out in service with this one pioneer sister, and we went to this woman's house, this elderly white lady. She was asking her about why God would treat Job the way he did. Like, why did God treat Job like that? I don't understand. What kind of God would do that? And this went on for a good half an hour. Half an hour feels like long enough anyway out in field service at one person's home. But it just did not end. And the woman was asking some really, 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 really good questions. Really good questions. And it had me thinking like, you know, but you know, of course I had that other side that's like, oh, she's just being whatever. But I was just like, that is a good question. I think I'm gonna have to go home and kind of do some research. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. And the pioneer sister is really just trying to, like, you know, explain God's reasoning and explain why we don't, you know God's reasoning and that kind of thing, and make sense of it all. And, you know, by the end, I was just like, I mean, if I had to judge this argument, I would say the householder won this one. And so when we were on our way out, she finishes up with the pioneer sister, and then she turns to me and she says, don't you ever, you know, something come to my house and not say anything. Something along those lines, like you need to learn how to speak. Something rude. Something rude. And after she said that, everything she'd said had been undone, because she was nasty, and I didn't appreciate that, and I didn't want to, you know what I mean? I'm like, if you feel like, you know, I don't know if this woman was trying to wake us up. I don't know what this woman's deal was. Maybe she was angry. I don't know. But her attitude at the end kind of like really, you know, undid a lot of the good that it undid the seed that she had planted. Or not completely, because I'm making this video now and I'm talking about it, but it was still one of those things where it's like, you know, message, if you want what someone says to stick, a little bit of honey, you know, don't give us the vinegar, you know, be a little nice about it, because she made some really great points, but, you know, I just wrote her off as angry and just, you know, full of vitriol and just whatever, just angry, because that's the way she presented herself. So, you know, message, do that. don't do that. So that was one experience that I had. And then there was another experience. Now this woman, I suspect, now in hindsight, I suspect this householder was an ex-Jehovah's Witness, or she went to a church where they told you how to talk to Jehovah's. Whatever the case was, she was like, she sounded so interested. She said, I was out in field service with this elderly sister, and this woman sounded so interested. And so I was like, okay, well, you know, we're here to just talk to you about the good news of, you know, God's kingdom and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, God's kingdom? And then she starts to ask me all of these really, really specific questions. She asked me, when exactly was God's kingdom established? And how do we know? What year was it? Was Jesus in heaven before then or after? Was Jesus on earth? In what form was he on earth? Like, she was asking me, and I'm just like firing off these answers. But in the meantime, I'm like going back in my mind, like, is that right? Is that what it is? because I couldn't remember. Like, I was just like, I didn't have she wasn't asking questions out the watchtower. This wasn't the question at the end of a paragraph. You know, this wasn't, you know, what color is the brown cow questions. This was like, you know, you need to know this stuff. Like, I should have known this stuff, and I did not know it. And, or I did, but it was like these were one of the things where the information had changed. So I'm trying to answer this woman, and it was embarrassing, and I was flustered, and it was obvious that I was flustered, and I wasn't angry at the lady. I was just happy that somebody was speaking to us, because it was a day full of doors being slammed in our face. But at the same time, it was still like, oh my God, am I freezing up right now? What's going on? And afterward, the elderly sister that I was with told me that I need to read up on God's kingdom. You need to read up on God's kingdom. Like, kind of, you know, like you kind of botched that. And she gave me this look and walked away. It was nasty, but what was funny about that whole interaction was the fact that this elderly sister is known to be a talker. Like, I went out in service with her that one time in life, and she was talking people's ears off to the point where I couldn't get a word in edgewise. Not once did she jump in when the householder was asking me all these detailed questions. Not once. So, you know, again, that was something that could have woken me up, but it's something that did stay with me. But I continued to be indoctrinated, and you know, I honestly, I think a lot of my staying within the organization was because I was raised in it, and because of guilt. You know, I felt like anything that I did that questioned certain moralities or certain morals, I guess, that I grew up having, I felt guilty about that. So I stayed in because of those things. And the interesting thing for me is that what got me to leave the organization was I just felt like it was a waste of time, and I did not like field service. And that was the main thing that had me leave, is because I was like, I can't do field service, and I don't like these people that much. So I'm willing to face the consequences. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's it. I stayed indoctrinated because I did not do enough research. I didn't ask enough questions. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people stay, is because they're not asking the right questions. So I just wanted to close out the video because the other one ended very abruptly because my battery died. But I did want to say that, you know, I learned a lot about indoctrination and waking up from being indoctrinated by my own waking up. And because of that, you know, I look forward to the moments where I can possibly run into a Jehovah's Witness and ask them a lot of the questions that I did not ask. But also to do it in a way that is not too jarring or too you know, I mean, of course they're going to be defensive. I expect that. But I think it's important that we show grace and be kind and respectful in our delivery, so as not to completely disarm someone to the point where they can't hear you anymore. So, you know, that's the only thing really that I wanted to say. I wanted to close this video out on, as well as, you know, talk to Jehovah's Witnesses that I know watch my channel. You know, ask yourself some questions. Like, if it's not in the Watchtower, maybe go beyond some of the questions that are in the Watchtower, and go beyond some of the questions that are in the literature. Ask what you really want to know. Some of the questions that I asked weren't even really the deepest questions. Like, I was just really curious about why men couldn't wear beards, or goatees, or different, you know, things like that, that really didn't symbolize anything bad, as far as I knew. You know, it didn't represent anything bad. Everybody in the Bible had beards. Why were Jehovah's Witnesses not allowed to have beards? That kind of thing. So, you know, sometimes it's just asking any question. Just asking questions. And so that's it. Ask questions. Thanks for watching. And have a great day. Have a great weekend. Bye.